ladies. Thank you. So this weekend we've remembered God's Amadi, and we've talked about some practical ways to live that out. We've talked about Manoach and how we return our souls to the place of rest. So this afternoon is the third part of our blueprint, looking at rest in Psalm 116. And this part is receiving God's peace. So with that, ready or not, you know what's coming. One more Hebrew word. This one you might have heard before. This word is shalom. Shalom. Now, I thought I had a good handle on what this was. We lived in the Middle East, and we would actually greet people, salam alaikum. Salam is derived from the same root as shalom, and it means peace. So when we would greet somebody, we would say, salam alaikum, peace be on you, peace be with you. Okay, got it, peace. But about a year ago, I did not have peace. And I dove into this word shalom with some friends, and I discovered it actually has a whole lot deeper of meaning than that. That's what I want to take some time to talk about right now with you. Shalom goes a whole lot deeper than just peace. It's more than just the absence of conflict. Shalom is a state of being. It's a state of wholeness, being complete and sound. Shalom. We see it as just peace in Isaiah 26:3. Judah will sing a song, and in it will be the words, "You keep him in perfect peace, shalom, whose mind is stayed on you." We see a little wider meaning of welfare in Genesis 29. Jacob inquires about Laban, and he says, is it well with him? Is it shalom? We get to the deeper meaning of it, though, later on in Genesis. In Genesis 41, Pharaoh is having these crazy dreams, and he hears about this guy Joseph who can interpret it. So he calls for Joseph, and they actually bring him out of prison. And after he prepares himself, he shaves, and he gets all ready to be before the Pharaoh. And he comes in. Pharaoh explains the situation, and he's like, okay, you need to interpret this for me. And Joseph says, wait a second. I love his response. He says, I can't do this for you, but God will do this for you. And God will give you an answer of shalom. God will give you a complete answer, a whole answer, a non-lacking answer. Shalom. So we see this deeper meaning there with Pharaoh in his dreams. Now, the Bible Project does an amazing job of describing this word shalom. And so I want us to turn our attentions to the screen now and watch this, because I feel like it will really cement this idea for us, and we'll be ready to look at it as our lens for Psalm 116.
The word peace is common in most languages. People can talk about peace treaties or times of peace. It means the absence of war. And in the Bible, the word peace can refer to the absence of conflict, but it also points to the presence of something better in its place. In the Old Testament, the Hebrew word for peace is shalom. And in the New Testament, the Greek word is eirene. The most basic meaning of shalom is complete or whole. The word can refer to a stone that has a perfect, whole shape with no cracks. It can also refer to a completed stone wall that has no gaps and no missing bricks. Shalom refers to something that's complex with lots of pieces that's in a state of completeness, wholeness. It's like Job, who says his tents are in a state of shalom because he counted his flock and no animals are missing. This is why shalom can refer to a person's well-being. Like when David visited his brothers on the battlefield, he asked about their shalom. The core idea is that life is complex, full of moving parts and relationships and situations, and when any of these is out of alignment or missing, your shalom breaks down. Life is no longer whole, it needs to be restored. In fact, that's the basic meaning of shalom when you use it as a verb. To bring shalom literally means to make complete or restore. So Solomon brings shalom to the unfinished temple when he completes it. Or if your animal accidentally damages your neighbor's field, you shalom them by giving them a complete repayment for their loss. You take what's missing and you restore it to wholeness. The same goes for human relationships. In the book of Proverbs, to reconcile and heal a broken relationship is to bring shalom. And when rival kingdoms make shalom in the Bible, it doesn't just mean they stop fighting, it also means they start working together for each other's benefit. This state of shalom is what Israel's kings were supposed to cultivate, and it rarely happened. So the prophet Isaiah, he looked forward to a future king, a prince of shalom. And his reign would bring shalom with no end. A time when God would make a covenant of shalom with his people and make right all wrongs and heal all that's been broken. This is why Jesus' birth in the New Testament was announced as the arrival of eirene. Remember, that's the Greek word for peace. Jesus came to offer his peace to others, like when he said to his followers, "My peace I give to you all." The apostles claimed that Jesus made peace between messed up humans and God when he died and rose from the dead. The idea is that he restored to wholeness the broken relationship between humans and their creator. This is why the Apostle Paul can say Jesus himself is our eirene. He was the whole complete human that I am made to be but have failed to be. And now he gives me his life as a gift. And this means that Jesus' followers are now called to create peace. Paul instructed local churches to keep their unity through the bond of peace, which requires humility and patience and bearing with others in love. Becoming people of peace means participating in the life of Jesus, who reconciled all things in heaven and earth, restoring peace through his death and resurrection. So peace takes a lot of work, because it's not just the absence of conflict. True peace requires taking what's broken and restoring it to wholeness, whether it's in our lives, our relationships, or in our world. And that's the rich biblical concept of peace.
Good, huh? Shalom. So this is the lens I want us to look at Psalm 116 with. Now, in Psalm 116, the word shalom is not actually used, but we can definitely see that the psalmist, without a doubt, has received God's shalom. How do we know that? Well, it's a passionate love song. He begins the psalm with, "I love the Lord." It's also worship. He says, "For you have delivered my soul from death, my eyes from tears, my feet from stumbling." And he ends the psalm with, "Praise the Lord." And he also wants everybody to know about it. He says, "I will pay my vows to the Lord in the presence of his people." In other words, I want everyone to see that the Lord has answered my plea. Why is this his state? How is he so passionate, worshiping God and wanting everybody to know about it? It's because he's received God's shalom. Think of it this way. Earlier this morning, we talked about menawach, the place of rest. Now, this place of rest, imagine it's like a child coming home from school, and mom is there waiting. She's waiting with a big hug. She's waiting with a tray of warm cookies. She's waiting to hear about your day, to sit down with you and talk with you. This kind of space is menawach. Now imagine that you have finished your plate of cookies, your snack. You finished talking about your day, and you look over and you see this gift on the table waiting for you. This gift is shalom. And Jesus is there, and Jesus hands it to you. And what happens? Inside this gift is Jesus' ability to remove all the angsty feelings and all of the lies that you've been telling yourself and all of the things that are going through your head that are not from him. And in its place, he restores you to the way you were supposed to be. He completes you. He brings you back to wholeness. Shalom. So if you return home and you see a gift like that on the table, are you going to be like, "Nah, I'm good"? No, and the psalmist wasn't either. I think the psalmist tore that sucker open and he received peace. He received God's shalom. And when you receive the gift of shalom, what is an appropriate response for such a gift? It's adoration, it's praise, it's worship, and it's wanting everybody to know about it. Now you know that God offers this shalom to us too, right? It's the best news ever. And if we can do the same as the psalmist. If we remember God's presence and we return our souls to the place of rest, the next thing that we do is to receive God's peace. In the book of John, Jesus says, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give to you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. He says, I have said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart. I have overcome the world. So how do we get shalom? How do we get this? When our daughter Eviana was about a year old, she came down with a really bad fever. I mean, it was super high. It spiked quickly. Everything wrong happened. Her lips turned blue. She started shaking. She went lethargic. And of course, it's in the middle of the night. And we were in Bahrain, and so we didn't have any family to call and have them come and watch Emmett and Maddie while we went to the hospital. Thankfully, we had some teammates who called, and they graciously came over and helped us out. And on the way to the hospital, I sat in the back seat with my daughter, terrified of the unknown and praying like I had never prayed before. In fact, there was probably a vow in there somewhere. Lord, if you just do this. But as I was in that back seat, something happened. Physically, I was holding my daughter, but I remembered God's presence with me. And I wouldn't have been able to articulate it at the time, but my heart returned to the place of Manoach. And in that place, God's peace was there, and I received it. And you know how I know I received it? Because it didn't make any sense to me. As the doctors were putting IVs in my baby and running all these tests on my sick child, my heart was at peace. That doesn't make any sense. But it's because I had received God's shalom. How do you know if you've received it? Well, the Psalmist Response is passion, love, adoration, and wanting the whole world to know about it. You see, in moments of chaos, if we want rest, we remember God's presence, we return our hearts to the place of rest, and we receive God's shalom. Shalom is the work of Christ, and it's what he desires for us. Shalom is his message, and shalom is his mission, and shalom is why he died for us, and it's what he wants for us. It's not the absence of conflict. It's that you have been wholly exposed in your fear and in your doubt and in your anxiety, and Jesus has wholly befriended you. And everything's going to be okay. Everything that could possibly happen in your life will be okay because of God's shalom. And that is such great news. For me, when Eviana was in the hospital, the evidence of shalom for me was that even though the diagnosis was that she had an infection and she was going to be hospitalized for a couple of days, I was able to worship. It was so crazy. Her fever would spike because the antibiotics hadn't kicked in yet. And of course, there was no nurse to be found. And so I would scoop her up in my arms and put that cool washcloth on her forehead, and I would worship over her. And I'm not just talking about singing the words to the song. I'm talking about deep, heartfelt worship. I had received God's shalom, and that was proof in that crazy circumstance that it was there and I had it with me. Recently, I came across a painting. This painting is called Louise Nurses Her Child, and it was painted in 1898 by a woman named Mary Cassatt. This painting is beautiful. I think they're going to show it up. There we go. Here it is on the screen. My eye was drawn to it because of the bold, beautiful colors, but also the relevancy to my current life situation as I'm nursing our 5th child. But the longer I looked at this picture, I thought, if shalom had a picture, I think this would be it. Look at the baby. She's receiving what she needs, and she's at peace. The mother longingly gazes at her, lovingly providing what the baby needs, and there's just peace and rest in that picture. Our hearts often need to be reminded that shalom is waiting for us. It's not often our first response in our times of chaos to remember that shalom is waiting. So we need urging and remembering. Now, I know this looks different in different stages and different seasons of life, but my prayer is that we do the work that it takes to remind ourselves that shalom is there waiting. So for today, we're going to provide you with a copy of this painting to take home with you. Put it somewhere where you see it all the time, somewhere where you can often remind yourself that God's shalom is there with you. And I hope that it does the work to remind you that God is there waiting to make you whole and complete. He wants your shalom. My friends, God desires for us to receive shalom, It's the part of our blueprint for rest. We remember God's presence, emadi. We return our souls to the place of rest, manoach, and we receive God's peace, shalom.